everyone, welcome back to another season of Recipe for Reality Small Bites, where I will be taking a different topic depending on what is going on in the actual Survivor season that is airing, as a little bit of a companion piece video. Now, on this most recent episode of Survivor, and I will have to, unfortunately, spoil it for the topic of this video, I, for the first time in a while, lost my winner pick very early on in the season. Now, I say first time in a while because it hasn't been since season 45 that I've actually lost a winner pick. I got the right winner pick in 46, now 47. I was riding high, and my winner pick goes out second, and I figured this would be a great opportunity to do a video just kind of chronicling all my winner picks from when I first started watching with Survivor China all the way to this past season with TK, and just looking at the different trends in who I pick for winners and why I pick them as winners, and to see that, like, I am not very good at picking Survivor winners. I've picked 3 winners correctly over the course of my entire viewing experience, and I picked a few runners-up and second runners-up or third jurors, or third place finalists. But for the most part, a majority of my winner picks either go out very early in the merge or pre-merge, or even second or third boots, TK being an example. So I am not the best winner pick predictor, but I do think it's always fun because winner picks are always made before the season starts, when you have really no inkling whatsoever on how these people are going to play, how these people are going to be received by their tribes. In some cases, we don't even know what tribes are going to be on. There are a couple winner picks that I'm looking back now that I don't have official documentation of, so I'm gonna kind of guess for a lot of these winner picks, like what I might have picked at the time, just based on the social kind of engagement I was having with the show, the things I was watching, the podcasts I was watching, maybe the lack of podcasts I was watching, kind of getting blinded by the edit or blinded by the hype around a certain player in particular. Let me just tell you, there is a player that I predicted for 3 seasons, and he didn't win any of them, and then I predicted his nephew for a future season, and he didn't win, and I predicted his brother for a Big Brother season, and he didn't win. So I've learned my lesson, maybe not get caught too much in the hype of characters at the time. You know, like, I'm not going to just assume that Q is going to win Survivor 50 when it comes along because he's been the biggest character of the new era. I'm going to look at who I think tends to be the more winner-like candidate of the group, and that's usually someone who is a little bit unassuming but still has the ground to stand on to make a deep run. I mean, we look at so many winners like Natalie Anderson, for example, who lays low, gets her revenge, strikes at the end. You look at more recent winners like Erica, like Kenzie, who kind of lay low the entire time but build those social bonds that really help traject them into that final portion of the game. And then you do have winners who ball out from the top, like Dee, who just dominated from beginning to end, but still had a little bit of an under-the-radar nature, or she was just surrounded by bigger personalities like Drew, a strong person like Austin, a very social player like Julie. You know, there's a very different strategies to get to the end and win, which is always why it's so hard to predict, especially when we haven't seen them actually play. We're just going based off of interviews. So I started documenting my winner picks starting at season 31 with Second Chances. I have written, documented power rankings for pregame. Everything before that, I kind of had to go based on guesses, based on old emails. I used to write emails to my family telling them who I think was in the best position or who my favorite was going into the season, just remembering things at the time. So I'm going to kind of go through seasons 15 through 30 right now and just tell you who I think my winner pick was, but this is still a little cloudy. I have a good feeling on probably half of these. The other half, I'm just kind of going deep into the archives of my mind to find. And then once we get to 31, I actually have documented winner predictions for those. So starting it off, I did start off strong. My first season was Survivor China, and from the top I said I think this guy Todd is gonna win. I didn't know anything about the show, so maybe that was a more obvious winner's edit, to where after that first episode I was like, yeah, this guy Todd, I want him to win. But I also think I was a kid at the time. Todd was kind of the most kiddish. He was the youngest, or at least looked the youngest because he was small, he was scrappy. So I think that's what endeared me to Todd in that season. But as you would learn, it would take 18 seasons to then get another correct winner pick. So Todd started my confidence off strong, and once he won, I was like, I'm good at predicting winners. And then came season 16, where I picked James as my winner pick, I think, at the time. This is one where it's a little cloudy because obviously I had only just watched China, so the only players I knew were Amanda and James. So I think I was rooting for the two of them. I really liked James. I remember being very upset when he got voted out with the 2 idols in his pocket on 15. So I was like, yeah, this is his season. He's going to come back, right those wrongs. But back then, again, I wasn't looking at certain trends. Like, he is the biggest, strongest guy. There was no way he was going to get to the end. But back then, little Dylan didn't know that. So I predicted James. He ended up finishing 7th, and it was due to an injury, so he could have even made it maybe 6th, maybe 5th. I don't think he gets to that final 4, and even if he does, I don't think he gets to the final 2 just based on how strong he is, and he is kind of likable and sociable, at least on that season. So I do think James was someone that was a valid winner pick, especially having only watched Survivor China, but I probably would have been better going with someone like Amanda. But I didn't know all the other returnees, all the other players. I think in retrospect, if I had looked at all the players beforehand, I probably would have picked someone like Suri or like Penner as a winner pick now. But moving on to 17, I picked Marcus as my winner pick at the time. My Nana actually taught him swimming lessons when he was a kid, so I remember that connection and being like, oh yeah, I'm rooting for that guy. It was very circumstantial. I had a connection with that person, which is why I was rooting for him. And it turned out to be a good winner pick for a while. He was kind of the Edgic favorite to win, but he ends up getting 10th place. Gabon is such a clusterfuck of a season that it makes sense that my winner pick is a very even keel player, a very well-rounded player, but ends up going in 10th. That just shows you how chaotic that season was. Then we get into season 18, and my winner pick for Token Teens was actually Spencer Dumb. Very, very unrecognizable, forgotten name, especially considering another young blonde Spencer came and played the game after him. But I remember Spencer because Spencer was, I think at the time, Todd's boyfriend. So I remember being like, oh, Todd, the guy I picked to win on my first season who dominated the game? Okay, I'll pick his boyfriend. And then Spencer ends up going out pre-merge in 12th place. This was the first time one of my winner picks had gone out before the jury, and I remember just being like, oh no, like, I'm terrible at predicting these things. Oh, Dylan, it would get far, far worse. Going on to season 19 Samoa, I actually did predict Russell Hantz. He was just such a heavy focus of the previews and the marketing beforehand that I remember at the time I was like, oh, okay, I think this is gonna probably be the winner because they're spending so much attention and focusing on him. But now looking back, I should have realized that was a red herring. Obviously on that season, Russell's such a unicorn in terms of how he was edited. We've never really seen another player like that just dominate the screen time and still make it to the end, but also lose. Usually if someone's dominating that screen time like a Boston Rob, he gets to the end and he wins on Redemption Island. So I was big on the Russell fever, and I think that's why also for Heroes vs. Villains, I think Russell was my winner pick for that as well. Again, it was kind of like the James thing for Micronesia, where I was coming off of a strong Russell season, and I was like, you know what, he's going to right his wrongs, he's going to go, he's going to win. Also, because no one else had watched Samoa yet, I was like, that's a big plus for him. Again, at that time, I still haven't gone back and watched all those seasons, so I didn't know necessarily who Rupert was, or Colby, or Stephanie, or Jerry, these kind of old school figures. I knew who the more recent players were, like JT and Amanda and James, and obviously Parvati, Suri. So I was looking at kind of the newer batch, and I was just like, you know what, Russell, I think he's going to get the job done, but I was wrong. And, I'd be wrong again in the future. 21, this is Nicaragua, and wow, if you're looking at this, yep, I predicted Purple Kelly to be the winner of that season. I think this was the era also where I was like, wow, women are beautiful, and I just want to pick the cutest girl that I want to go on a date with. I was playing my mind as, like, The Bachelor rather than as a Survivor fan, but I did think, coming off of Parvati winning, Natalie White had just won 19. Sandra, while she's not like one of the young pretty girls archetype, she was still an underestimated, woman who, kind of got the upper hand on all the men at the end of the season. So I thought that there could be a trend continuing at the point. I thought Kelly kind of fit the mold of what a Parvati would be, almost a little sweeter, almost like if you combined Amanda and a Parvati, you kind of take the sweetness of Amanda with like the feistiness and like kind of flirt game of Parvati. But Kelly ended up just being kind of a non-entity. Obviously, she quits the game, so she gets like the iconic purple edit. That's why they call it the purple edit, is because it was Purple Kelly. So this is one of my more embarrassing winner picks. She still makes 8th place, so like she placed well and she quit, so she probably would have made it even further. But Purple Kelly, in terms of like most iconic survivors for all the wrong ways, I'm a little ashamed of that winner pick, but also at the time I can understand why young Dylan made the pick he did. It's always hard with an all newbie cast, which moves us on to 22. There were only 2 returnees, which was Boston Rob and Russell, and again, I was riding the Russell train. I was like, you know what, 3 times the charm, he's gonna get it done, and I was so wrong. Obviously, I had watched Russell's seasons. I hadn't watched Marquesas or All-Stars yet, so I had only known Boston Rob from Heroes vs. Villains, and honestly, it's just so much easier to pick a returnee than it is to pick someone new, because you've seen their games before, and I still was impressed by Russell's 2 games. At the time, I was one of those guys who was like, yeah, Russell should have won twice, and, I was wrong, I'll admit. I do think Parvati or Sandra should have won Heroes vs. Villains, and I do agree agree with Natalie winning Samoa, even though I do think Russell still dominated those seasons. But I think at 22, Redemption Island, I was just still aboard the Russell train, which then brings us to the end of this Russell train at 23, South Pacific. I did predict Brandon Hance as the winner. It's really funny because at the time, I remember I was like, I really like Michaela and I really like Brandon because I hope he can be like a nicer Russell. And as we would see in the future, that really wasn't the case with Karamoan, which we'll get to in a bit. But I remember being between Michaela and Brandon and ultimately picking Brandon because I was like, listen, if his uncle couldn't do it, it'd be a cool story if he did it. In retrospect, that's really funny because Michaela was Brandon's like biggest foil. Brandon got her out in the pre-merge. So if I'd gone with Michaela, she actually would have gone out way earlier at the hands of Brandon, and I would have been upset. But in retrospect, I probably should have picked Michaela because she's someone I would pick nowadays as like a winner pick. Back then, I don't think I would have ever picked Brandon as a winner pick if I had the mindset I do now. But at the time, again, I was on the Hance train, and the Hance train would finally end with Big Brother 14, where I picked Willie and then learned all the wrong reasons. And I was like, yep, nope, never picking a Hance again to win any of these games. Even if it's just 3 Hances on an island, I will probably predict them all to lose at that point. Moving on to One World, this is another sad one. I predicted Leaf. Leaf gets 9th place, not a terrible placement, but he was also like Purple Kelly, just so purple on that season. I just remember being like really inspired by the fact that he was a little person playing the game. I thought that it was a cool story. I didn't know the women would be so dominant on that season. Again, it's really hard with all newbie casts. At least I didn't predict Colton, you know. But I think Leaf was someone I was just like really inspired by the story of it all. Like, oh, it's a first. But I think Leaf ended up being just a real non-entity on that season. Season 25, Philippines, this kind of continues my trend with Purple Kelly, where I was like, I'm going to pick the pretty girl because, you know, Parvati won, and I picked Angie, which, again, is a terrible, terrible winner pick. She gets 16th place. She's on that tribe that just keeps losing and losing. She does have some memorable moments in the season, so, like, I can see why I was won over by her in the preseason. I was also very charmed by her. She is beautiful, but I do think, you know, nowadays, I don't think I would pick someone like Angie as the winner of a season. I think that was definitely like the tween to teenage Dill kind of obscuring his mind a bit. 26, I did pick another like younger, prettier girl, but I did pick Allie, not just because she was young and pretty and I had a crush on her, but I did pick Allie because I thought she actually did have a well-rounded social and strategic promise. I remember just, you know, watching all the favorites. I was really underwhelmed by all the favorites they chose. At the time, I didn't love Cochran. I didn't love Dawn. I liked Brandon at the time, oddly enough, but I didn't think he was going to win after all the Hance train had burned me. I liked Brenda. I loved Eric. You know, I liked Malcolm, but there was no favorite that I was like, yep, they're going to win. So I was like, you know what? I'll bet on a fan. And I bet on Allie, and that turned out to be the exact wrong pick because she's the first fan to go out in 19th place. Statistically, this is the worst winner pick I've ever had. But I do think, you know, it was a valid winner pick because I did see glimmers of good strategy, and we saw it. You know, she gets into a good alliance early on. It's just she got an alliance of 4 on a tribe of 10, and it ended up kind of biting her in the butt. But I do think Allie, you know, was a bit more guilty by association. I don't think she was her own undoing in the game. Like, I think she definitely still showed some prowess and potential. But yeah, 19th place, 19th. Whoa, I'm tripping over my words. 19th place out of 20. Not good. Not good. I will not pretend that that's good. Moving on to 27. Blood vs. Water was very tough because I was like, you know what, finally catching up on a lot of the older seasons. And I was like, you know what, the biggest central focus of the season that they seem to be, you know, pushing in the marketing is Aris versus Vetus. And I thought, you know what, we saw Sandra do it. I put my eggs in Aris's basket. I thought maybe he would be the second 2-time winner of the show, also because he was probably the most underestimated winner at the time. He's someone that I think a lot of people forgot had already won the game. He ends up getting 11th place. He ends up being a big threat come jury time. So it wasn't the worst winner pick, but I did think, you know, maybe there's potential we'll see another 2-time winner, which we would see again with Tony. Speaking of Tony, Cagayan, I kind of went again with the crush skewed winner pick, and I picked Alexis. But again, I think Alexis had the kind of potential that Allie did. You know, this is much more of like a Parvati potential than it was someone like, you know, Angie, where I was totally blinded by lust. You know, I do think Alexis, though, showed some real good promise, and I did think we saw it in the game. She gets sniped out right before the merge. Nowadays, I'd probably pick someone like Tasha or Spencer as the winner pick based on preseason press, but Jeff even said Spencer had no chance of winning the game. So I think a lot of Jeff's cast assessment also kind of turned me off. I was just thinking of someone who seemed well-rounded. Alexis seemed like she could be good in challenges, but also very smart, but also very likable. She was on the beauty tribe, who I thought was pretty strong overall. So Alexis was my pick, not my worst pick. Moving on to 29, this was kind of a personal pick here, San Juan del Sur. I went with Josh. I really liked Reed and Josh because I was a theater guy. I still am. And I wanted to root for a Broadway performer. So I went with Josh, and it ended up being a really strong pick until the merge. Josh was dominating that first half of the game in this kind of rivalry with Jeremy that kind of built up at the merge. So I'm very happy with my Josh winner pick. I think there's a world where he does win that season if he's not looked at as a big of a threat as he is. On 30, this is a first time I got a finalist since Russell Hantz, but it ended up being Will Sims, which is, again, another dud winner pick. He makes it to the end, but he has no winner capital whatsoever. Again, I was entertained by his personality. I thought this is a different kind of player. He'll be a different kind of winner, and I was wrong. But now moving on to all the seasons that I have documented evidence for, and at 31, I did predict Kelly Wigglesworth. I think I was just so won over by the story of it all that I was like, you know what? To get second place on the first season, come back and win. I almost wanted it for the story, but as I was watching the season unfold, I was like, where's Kelly? She's practically invisible, and she gets 11th place. On 32, this is another really bad winner pick. I picked Liz Markham. She kind of was the Alexis for me, where I thought she would be very good socially, but also very convincing with her beauty, but also very smart and very strong. I was very surprised that she went out as early as she did, so I don't really remember much of Liz, but I remember being really hyped on her going into this season, thinking she was going to be super well-rounded, and she only gets 16th place. But here we are, Millennials versus Gen X, where I finally got my groove back, and I predicted Adam as the winner, and you know what? Adam won the game. There was actually rumors preseason that Adam had quit the game to go be with his mother, kind of like a Jenna Maraska thing, because everyone knew his mother was sick, and the rumor was that he either got medevaced or left the game to go be with his mother. And I remember that kind of circling on Twitter and on Reddit. And I stay away from spoiler Reddits, but it was in kind of like the edgic speculation where everyone's like, yeah, no, I've heard rumors that Adam leaves early. So I was very nervous picking him as my winner pick, but I was like, you know what? I stick with my guns there. I just thought he was a very strong candidate. I thought he was kind of similar to Todd in a way, where he was small and underestimated, but he had a really big mind for the game. So I'm very glad I stuck with that winner pick, because it turned out to be true, and I wouldn't get it right again for another 13 seasons. So I'm very happy that Adam ended up proving people wrong, and those spoilers were wrong, and that he ended up winning the game. At 34, Game Changers, I actually was going off of like the Russell Hantz logic of, playing back-to-back seasons. They don't know what you did the time before. I thought she had a good redemption arc, so I picked Michaela as my prediction. She made it 7th place, so it was a pretty good winner pick. I do think, in retrospect, she might have been a little too big of a personality to trust as a winner pick, but I figured, you know what, maybe it's time for something a little fresher, a little newer. No one had seen her game on Millennials vs. Gen X, so I was excited to watch Michaela play again. I put my eggs in her basket, and she delivered for the most part. I do think now in retrospect, maybe I would have picked, someone like Haley or Sierra Dawn Thomas, someone who was even more under the radar as a winner's pick. But you know what? I think Michaela was a little more fun because she is a more fun character, so I wanted to root for her. At 35, Heroes vs. Healers vs. Hustlers, HHH, I picked Alan Ball as my winner pick. And you know what? Starting off episode 1, I was very nervous, with the whole JP stripped down to his underwear to show that he didn't have the idol. I was very nervous for Alan. I just thought he would be very well-rounded. He was an athlete, but he seemed like he had a softer side. Turns out that was not the case, which actually reminds me of a more recent player who just went home literally last week. But Alan, one of my worst winner picks, comes in 15th place. At 36, Ghost Island. This person made it to the merge, made it pretty far, but kind of like Purple Kelly, and Kelly Wigglesworth, I guess. I really forget this person was on that season. That's Jenna. She got 10th place, so she obviously did well, but going into the season, I was high on Jenna. I was like, you know what? She seems like she's going to be super strong. Again, anytime I picked a woman to win the game, I always thought about the fact that they would be social, strategic, and strong, and Jenna felt like she ticked all 3 of those boxes, and that's why I was confident in picking her. The very next season, though, I went more alpha male route. For Dave vs. Goliath, I picked Dan, and this is only similar to Marcus, where he actually he grew up in Gainesville, Florida, which is where my dad grew up, so I was like, you know what? I like that kind of hometown connection. I also like the fact that he was, very strong. He was a cop, but he also seemed to be a little bit of a golden retriever type personality. And we see that a little bit with Kara on the island. He kind of gets swept up in that showman. So I think Dan was a promising winner pick, but again, this kind of taught me that these like alpha males very rarely win the game. And Ozzy couldn't do it, Malcolm couldn't do it, and I feel like Dan kind of fit that even more in like a kind of dodo way, like where he gets, you know, idled out of the game, I believe. So Dan was a promising winner pick, but I don't think I'll ever pick like another alpha male again because of it. At 38, Edge of Extinction, I kind of learned my lesson from previous seasons with like Blood vs. Water and Karamoan, and I was like, you know what, if it's newbies and returnees, I will pick a returnee. So I picked Aubrey, which happened to be her worst of her 3 outings. She got 16th place. And this was actually the rare exception where the newbies beat the veterans. So, yeah, I was totally misguided there. I, in retrospect, probably should have picked like Lauren or Victoria, because they kind of fit my, you know, kind of criteria of what I look for in a woman winner pick, where I want someone who's social, strategic, and has the physical attributes. And I think they did. Whereas Aubrey, I was just so, you know, hoping she would get it on her 3rd try. I actually think when I ranked them, I think I had David actually going out very early in the game, and it's funny because he's actually the last one left standing, I believe, either him or Wentworth for the returnees, and Aubrey ends up being the first one out. But Aubrey's not the first boot. You know, she makes it a few rounds, but she is the first boot from her tribe. So it was definitely a disappointing showing for Aubrey. Moving on to Island of the Idols, I'm just happy I picked anyone but Dan to win the game. I picked Missy, who, you know, had her controversial moments on the island, but she reminded me of someone like Michaela, where I just thought she was going to come in as a real strong force, like be this kind of dominant challenge beast. And she ended up kind of fading into the background at times. You know, she had her moments to shine. She wasn't as likable as I wish she had been, but I had really high hopes for her preseason. She ends up getting 10th. And then another person who kind of ends up middle of the pack on Winners of War. It was very hard to find a winner that I felt could be an iconic winner for the season and the story, because I always tend to look at like who would be a good representative, but also like who I thought could still skate enough under the radar and not be a huge threat. So I went with Tyson. I felt like he was the perfect blend of all of those. But Tyson, it just ended up being an old school, new school thing, and he ended up being more on the old school side. He does come back into the game, and I was like, wow, if he ends up making his way to the end after coming back, I was really excited. My hope was restored, and then he goes out fairly after he returns. So Tyson, I do stand by. I think it was a solid winner pick going into that season, but if I had known just how important that new school versus old school dynamic would have shaken out, I probably would have picked someone like Wendell, even though Wendell does worse than Tyson. I might have picked someone like Michelle Fitzgerald at the time. I think I predicted Michelle as like the 2nd or 3rd place that season, or someone like Adam, you know, but I think at the time I was like, you know, Tyson feels like the good blend between old and new school. He's strong, but not the strongest. He's social, but not the most social. He's strategic, but not the most strategic. So it was kind of that middle glue guy thing that we hear Sam talking about on 47. But now going into the new era, and there are actual videos you can watch where I talk about my winner picks with Zach. So I'll go through them quick. 41 was Ricard. This was a real big welcome change of pace, because starting with Alan Ball, I had gone 15th, 10th, 11th, 16th, 10th, 11th. So getting a 5th place finish was huge. And Ricard going into the finale was the one to beat. If he wins that last immunity and wins fire, he wins the season. So I was very excited that Ricard actually had a really good chance of winning. This was the best I had done since Will Sims, since Adam Klein. Sorry, I forgot about Adam. But this was the best I had done since Adam, and I was really happy to get someone in the finale that I could root for, even though I knew going into it that it would be a tough mountain to climb if he were to lose an immunity. 42, I predicted Tori. She did pretty well. She made it to jury. She gets 9th place. The way she goes out is a little bit unconventional, just in the way that tribal council kind of unfolded. But again, I think it was a solid winner pick. I'm happy with it. I think she was a little bit more of a character and a little bit more negatively shown on the show than I expected her to be. I thought she would be kind of this like boss, kind of, you know, likable, kind of social butterfly. But it ended up being that she was more of this underdog, kind of unlikable, kind of villain-esque figure. But that's what made it a really exciting time watching Tori as well, because I was kind of like an inverse of how I expected her to play. But regardless, she places 9th place. 43, another one that I'm really proud of. I picked Owen. You know, Owen makes final tribal council. He doesn't have any win equity at the end, but I knew from the get-go, just from preseason, that Owen was longed for the game, and turns out I was right, so I was very happy with that. 44, this is the probably worst performance I had in the new era until 47, which was Claire. She got 15th place. You know, I don't think Claire was always given the most fair shot, just because she, you know, sat out of some challenges. She never got the chance to prove herself. I do think Claire on a return with a better tribe could actually be a contender, but that was the worst new era until 47, of course, that I had predicted up until then. Then we move on to Survivor 45, where I was very big on the Kelly train. I thought Kelly was like the most confident I had been on a winner pick in like forever, and I was so confident. But then it ends up being a similar situation to like Josh from San Juan del Sur, where she just ends up being the biggest threat at like the final 10, and they need to take her out. But I remember up until her blindside, I was still feeling good. I was like, you know what, D, I'm getting those winner vibes. I got some winner vibes from Emily Flippin as the season was going along, but I was like, you know what, I still think Kelly has a path, and then she gets sniped out and it was devastating, but I still do feel good about that winner pick. I don't think that was a misguided winner pick at all, because she clearly showed she was very well rounded and well equipped for the game. Honestly, if she is to come back for Survivor 50, she might be my winner pick for that. Like, I really do think Kelly has a real strong potential. And then we move on to our dear and darling queen, Miss Kenzie Petty, for Survivor 46. My third winner pick ever. Her, Todd, and Adam join a very distinct club. And I was getting worried at the end. I was worried Charlie would beat her, but I was very happy when Kenzie pulled it out in an unconventional way. You know, she got a vote from Maria when she wasn't necessarily expected to, but she ends up winning the game nonetheless. And from just her preseason, I was a little nervous because Jam Jam had just won, and she reminded me of another like Jam Jam figure, but she honestly delivered on everything I think she would be in the season. So I was very happy with Kenzie. Probably my best winner pick ever. You know, Todd, it's hard to say because it was the first season I ever watched. Adam was obviously a good pick, but also just kind of the, you know, idea that he was a super fan, he was in the community, maybe it was a little bit more of a skewed mindset for me. But 46, Kenzie, that was just gut instinct from the top, and I'm very happy that I was right with that prediction. And then we move on to the most recent, which is TK from Survivor 47, and I'm just very bummed that TK went out as early as he did. I understand why he did. He came out too strong out the gate. I thought he had a solid premiere, but there was just a tinge of negativity. You know, it still seemed like Asia was getting the better edit on that journey despite TK getting the supplies, and it seemed like Caroline's comment about the men broing out together was going to be more of a negative against the men than it was going to be a negative against Caroline and her assumptions of it. So I should have seen the red herrings in episode 1, the red flags, if you will, because then episode 2 comes, and it was really kind of a big TK downfall episode, you know, him talking on the beach with Sue, and then him with the eye rolling from Tiana. It was just a pretty disappointing performance from TK, and I think on any given season, TK normally makes the merge if his tribe keeps winning, or just if they want to preserve strength, but this is a season where Gabe wants to play a Russell Hantz-esque game, so I don't think they're looking at tribe strength, and even though TK's gone, I think Kyle's strong, I think Gabe's strong, I think Sue's pretty strong, Caroline's very smart, good at puzzles, Tiana seems to be pretty strong and smart at puzzles, so I think they still have a strong tribe where losing TK wasn't like a huge, blow to their strength. We'll see tonight how it goes based on the episode, but I do think TK is someone who normally makes it far, so I felt good picking him. I was like, you know what, I haven't picked this big, strong alpha male in a long time, and I should have learned with Dan in season 37, and I should have learned with Alan Ball, and I should have learned time and time again with Aris and Josh and James Clement, all these players that are these bigger, stronger guys who win immunities rarely make it all the way to the end and win. So I think now going forward, I'm never going to pick the biggest, strongest guy to win. And I think that's what this whole experiment has shown me, is that, like, you know what, if you pick the small, unassuming, pretty, strategic girl, they usually don't win. But if you pick the big, strong alpha male, they don't usually win. Usually if you pick the small, strategic guy like Todd or Adam, it works out for you. So I think that's kind of going to be the lane I go in. I mean, Kenzie was just a very lucky, kind of strike of gold there. But I really don't know how to now make my winner picks going forward. But it seems like my trends tend to be that I end up picking people who are either big pre-merge flameouts like Alan Ball or TK, or they end up being kind of these like under-edited, middle of the pack players like Jenna from Ghost Island, or like Alexis from Kageon, or even like someone like Purple Kelly. So it's very tough to say. The winner edit is always tough, especially when you haven't even gotten to the show itself. So right now, I will say, I think Teeny is now my new winner pick for 47, and watch her go home tonight. That'll be so devastating. But that is my video for all my winner picks, just chronicling a history, not necessarily ranking anything. Obviously, my top 3 winner picks are Todd, Adam, and Kenzie, but just kind of just diving into all my thoughts at the time, why I picked them and how I thought they would do. And now in retrospect, looking back at some of these and laughing, like Claire getting 15th place, Allie getting 19th place, obviously TK getting 17th place. Like, I've made some rough predictions, but that's part of the fun of Survivors, being wrong sometimes and then being able to kind of escape escape the winner pick from your brain and just enjoy the season, which I can do now because I don't have to root for my winner pick because they are gone. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned. We're doing a Recipe for Reality every single week. These small bites are going to come every single week in Companion. Next week, we're kind of going back to episode 1 a little bit, but I'm going to be doing my top 10 favorite celebrities to play the game of Survivor. Not necessarily how well I thought they did, but just the most enjoyable times I had watching a celebrity on the island, inspired, of course, by John Lovett, going out first on this season. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for more videos here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe, like, and comment for more. Thanks, guys.